Ferrari's nightmare season just got worse. The FIA found a suspicious part on Lewis Hamilton's car. The rear suspension may have flexed illegally under load, breaking technical rules that could lead to disqualification. This isn't a small infraction. If confirmed, Ferrari could lose constructor points and McLaren's domination becomes even more brutal. And the twist: Hamilton's own engineers didn't see it coming. The FIA calls the evidence impactful. Subscribe now, because what happens in the next 24 hours could rewrite the final standings of the 2025 season. The FIA's post-race compliance review of Lewis Hamilton's SF25 began like any routine inspection. Visual checks, sensor calibration, and weight confirmation were completed without issue. But when engineers began load cell analysis on the rear suspension assembly, something did not align. Under standardized vertical and lateral load simulations, the right rear arm displayed behavior outside its declared tolerance window. Specifically, the deformation rate under simulated cornering force exceeded the flexion threshold permitted by Article 11.3 of the technical regulations. That rule states clearly, any structural element must remain rigid under operating load unless explicitly declared and homologated. The component in question had passed prior scrutineering. But now, it appeared to act differently under dynamic conditions. To confirm the irregularity, the FIA initiated a secondary set of tests known internally as compliance stress tests. Using hydraulic actuators to simulate real-world G-force applications, inspectors measured how the suspension arm compressed, twisted, and rebounded under force vectors modeled after Hamilton's telemetry from lap 38 in Sector 3. That sector, a sequence of long, sweeping left-handers near the hotel complex, is known to expose any instability in the rear. The data showed that the component deflected laterally by 3.2 millimeters more than declared a deviation that might not sound dramatic, but in F1 is enough to shift aero balance and mechanical grip in key corners. The team's defense hinges on tolerance variance, essentially claiming that the flex could be attributed to fatigue, temperature expansion, or manufacturing variance. But the FIA's counterpoint is mathematical. Based on the part's carbon fiber weave geometry and layup documentation, that amount of flex exceeds what even thermal expansion could explain. Moreover, when compared to the exact same component used on Leclerc's car, the deviation was not replicated. His rear right element flexed within 0.8 millimeters of the benchmark. Hamilton's exceeded it by more than triple that amount. The question is no longer whether it happened, but whether it was preventable. Video footage from multiple angles strengthens the FIA's case. High-speed cameras placed at apex exits in turns 16 and 17 show Hamilton's car squatting more noticeably on right-side suspension compression than other cars with similar fuel loads and tire wear. Slow-motion playback reveals brief but visible asymmetry during corner exit, particularly when Hamilton applies throttle under lateral load. This behavior correlates with data pulled from onboard gyroscope sensors, which recorded a non-uniform pitch yaw transition at 228 kilometers per hour. That metric typically aligns with uneven compliance or differential in axle stiffness, both symptoms of unauthorized flex. Ferrari has argued that the part passed durability protocols pre-race and that no performance gain was sought or realized. However, the FIA has reminded the team in writing that performance benefit is not required to trigger a penalty. The rule is absolute. The car must comply with the design specifications at all times. A broken part, a fatigued element, or a manufacturing anomaly that creates deviation still constitutes a violation. This is where Hamilton's race engineer could not offer further defense. Once the part flexed outside specification, regardless of whether it was deliberate, the car, by definition, became non-compliant. Behind closed doors, the focus is now on documentation. Ferrari is being asked to produce the original CAD drawings, stress test simulations, and manufacturing batch numbers for the component. The FIA wants to verify if the issue was isolated or systemic, if a wider pattern of discrepancy is found in batch data, or if the team failed to disclose material variation during setup. The punishment could extend beyond Abu Dhabi. That means constructor points could be revised and technical directives issued before the 2026 season. In a worst-case scenario, teams may be forced to redesign suspension elements to meet tighter scrutiny standards that now loom large. At this point, the evidence is pointing toward one reality: the component behaved illegally under load. Whether by error or intent, the outcome is the same. And in Formula One, when rules are breached, the consequences are severe. Disqualification from the race is not just possible, it is likely. For Ferrari, this means a brutal end to the most difficult season in years. For Hamilton, it's another layer of frustration. And for the FIA, this is now more than a technical breach. It is the spark that may ignite a new era of zero tolerance in part design compliance. Because the gap wasn't massive. It was 3.2 millimeters. But that in F1 is the space between legal and gone. To understand why this case is so important, we have to examine how suspension components behave under dynamic load in modern Formula One. At this level, every millimeter matters. Rear suspension arms are not just load-bearing structures, they are integral to maintaining a stable aerodynamic platform. Under acceleration and cornering, they support the car's pitch and roll behavior, helping maintain a consistent rake angle. If a suspension element flexes more than expected, it alters the height of the rear end, potentially stalling or accelerating airflow beneath the floor. That means more downforce when the car needs it most without the drag penalty that normally comes with added wing load. The FIA prohibits such behavior unless it's declared and approved in advance because these effects, though subtle, translate into real performance advantages. Even a small flex can help a driver rotate the car more easily through corners or stabilize the rear in fast directional changes. In Hamilton's case, the part in question appears to have deformed in a way that absorbed lateral energy and returned vertical compliance, effectively softening corner exits. This behavior was seen most clearly in Sector 3, where high-speed sweeps demand absolute stability. Onboard footage shows Hamilton's car settling mid-corner in a way that Leclerc's did not, and that's precisely what raised suspicion. Now, some will argue, if Hamilton still only finished 8th, what's the advantage? But that's not the FIA standard. The governing body is not tasked with evaluating impact in terms of lap time, only with ensuring legal conformity. A car can breach the rules and still underperform. What matters is that it was not in the legal envelope of behavior. In the past, similar cases have resulted in post-race exclusions, most notably in 2019, when a wing deflection test on a midfield team cost them all points despite no visible on-track benefit. That's the precedent Ferrari fears. Because once the data shows illegal behavior, the rest is procedural. Hamilton's own style of driving adds further complexity. Known for aggressive trail braking and precise rear-end rotation, he relies on a car that gives immediate feedback under load. Engineers have noted for years that Hamilton demands suspension stiffness settings that allow him to lean on the rear axle without unsettling the platform. If this flexing component intentional, or not provided that under pressure, it may have masked the very instability he complained about over radio. The irony is brutal. The same part he believed was letting him down may have actually helped him through the worst parts of the race, without him ever realizing it. Ferrari's side of the story is more nuanced. They insist that the component came from the same batch as Leclerc's and passed all internal quality checks. But during final practice, Hamilton's rear end was reportedly reassembled with a modified alignment setup favoring high-speed balance. That change, subtle in documentation, may have altered how the suspension distributed load under full fuel and tire degradation. Ferrari's engineers now face the task of proving that no intent existed and that any flex was a spontaneous result of part fatigue. But in F1, proof of intent is irrelevant when structural behavior breaks the rulebook. This is the hidden danger of modern engineering at the limit. Every team works in the gray area, pushing tolerances to the very edge of legality. Suspension components are tuned down to microscopic margins. One small deviation, one batch with slightly different resin curing, and a car moves from legal to illegal without anyone noticing. The difference between legal flex and a penalty lies not in a dramatic failure, but in a slow-motion test, a spreadsheet, and a compliance envelope being stretched 1 millimeter too far. That's the cost of operating at the absolute frontier of race car design. And this is why the FIA is taking this case so seriously. It's not about Ferrari trying to cheat. It's about what happens when a team, under pressure, chooses not to recheck a part that sat right on the limit. In 2026, with a new regulation era arriving, cases like this will shape how much freedom teams have to innovate. Flexi floors, variable stiffness arms, and dynamic ride control are all areas being tightened. Hamilton's car, or more precisely, one overlooked component on it, may become the cautionary tale that pushes the sport into an even stricter future. Because one suspension arm just changed the conversation. If the FIA confirms that the rear suspension part on Hamilton's SF-25 violated compliance regulations, the consequences will be immediate and public. The standard penalty for a technical breach of this nature is exclusion from the race classification. That means Hamilton's 8th place finish in Abu Dhabi would be erased. The team would lose the points. The final constructors' standings would be recalculated. And Ferrari, already demoralized, would fall further behind Mercedes in the financial and development allocations tied to end-of-season rankings. In a year where every point counted, this penalty could redefine Ferrari's off-season strategy. But beyond numbers, the real damage is reputational. Lewis Hamilton arrived at Ferrari with the weight of a legacy. 7 world titles, dozens of victories. The mission was clear: end his career by bringing glory back to Maranello. Instead, his first season ends not only winless, but under investigation. The image of Hamilton climbing out of the car in Abu Dhabi exhausted, 8th, defeated is now stained with technical controversy. If his car is disqualified, it will mark the first time in over a decade that a Hamilton result was erased due to non-compliance. And no matter how unintentional the breach was, the narrative will follow him into 2026. Inside the team, the consequences will be even more disruptive. Charles Leclerc had already made his dissatisfaction clear. His post-race comments were sharp: it's now or never. If Ferrari ends the year, not just behind McLaren and Red Bull, but also embroiled in a penalty scandal, the pressure on Leclerc to consider his options will intensify. His rumored exit clause is tied not just to results, but to structural trust. An engineering failure like this, especially one that affects Hamilton alone, could be interpreted as chaos, or worse, favoritism. The unity Ferrari needs to survive the 2026 reset may already be unraveling. The political ripple effect is also unavoidable. Other teams will seize this moment. Red Bull has already raised concerns about how the FIA enforces post-race compliance checks. McLaren, with both titles secured, now pushes for consistent transparency to protect their legitimacy. Mercedes, watching from the outside, sees an opening both in competitive narrative and in potential recruitment. In Formula One, technical breaches are never isolated. They become weapons in the next negotiation, the next regulation debate, the next budget cap discussion. One error on one part in one car changes everything around it. And then there's the media storm. F1's fanbase is global, aggressive, and tuned into every detail. Social media has already exploded with comparisons to previous disqualifications from Aston Martin's plank were in 2023 to Renault's mass damper ban years before. Hashtags trend. Conspiracies flourish. And for Ferrari, already the most scrutinized team in the sport, this scandal adds fuel to every critic who claims they've lost control. Sponsors ask questions. Partners want answers. And the Tifosi-proud, loyal, but increasingly impatient demand accountability. The Scarlet Red brand bleeds under pressure, and now the wounds are very public.